Hello, Airs Bears, and welcome back to Storytime. Today we will be reading Chapter 2 from C.S. Lewis, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. If you missed Chapter 1, you can check further down in the discussion on this page, or if you look to that way, I think it's that way. There's a little box that says videos, and if you click on it, you should see a picture of me. I'll try to remember to hold up the book so you know which one it is in future thumbnails, but we'll see. But today we have Chapter 2. Yesterday we left off with the Pevensey children, Lucy, Edmund, Susan, and Peter. And Susan, Peter, and Edmund were off exploring the attic of the house they were living in of the old professor, but Lucy had decided to explore the wardrobe. And while she was in the wardrobe, she discovered that she was in a forest. And at the very end of the chapter, she met a fawn. Today we'll be reading Chapter 2, What Lucy Found There. So here's our little picture, and if you see that picture, you can see the fawn and Lucy underneath an umbrella. So here we are, Chapter 2, What Lucy Found There. "Good evening," said Lucy. But the fawn was so busy picking up his packages that at first he did not reply. When he had finished, he made her a little bow. "Good evening, good evening," said the fawn. Excuse me, I don't want to be too inquisitive, but should I be right in thinking that you are a daughter of Eve?" "Well, my name's Lucy," said she, not quite understanding him. "But you are, forgive me, you are what they call a girl?" asked the fawn. Of course I'm a girl," said Lucy. "And you are, in fact, human?" Of course I'm human," said Lucy, still a little puzzled. "Oh, to be sure," said the fawn. "How silly of me, so stupid. But I've never seen a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve before. I am delighted. That is to say," and then he stopped as if he were going to say something that he had not intended, but had remembered in time. "Oh, delighted," he went on. "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Tumnus." "Well, I'm very pleased to meet you, Mr. Tumnus," said Lucy. "And may I ask, oh Lucy, daughter of Eve," said Mr. Tumnus, "how have you come into Narnia?" "Narnia? What's that?" said Lucy. "Well, this is the land of Narnia," said the fawn. "It's where we are now. All that lies between the lamp-post and the great castle of Cair Paravel. It's on the eastern sea. And you have come from the wild woods of the west?" "Well, I got in through the wardrobe in the spare room," said Lucy. "Ah," said Mr. Tumnus in a rather melancholy voice. "Ah, if only I had worked harder at geography when I was a little fawn. I should no doubt know all these strange countries, but it's too late now." But they aren't countries at all," said Lucy, almost laughing. It's only just back there. At least, well, I'm not quite sure. It was summer there." "Ah, meanwhile," said Mr. Tumnus, "it is winter in Narnia, and it has been for ever so long. And we shall both catch cold if we stand here talking in the snow. Daughter of Eve, from the far land of Spare where eternal summer reigns, around the bright city of Wardrobe, how would it be if you came and had a lovely tea with me?" Well, thank you very much, Mr. Tumnus, but I was wondering whether I ought to be getting back." "Oh, it's just round the corner, and there'll be a roaring fire, and toast, and sardines, and cake." "Well, it's very kind of you, but I shan't be able to stay too long." "Well, if you will take my arm, O daughter of Eve, I shall be able to hold the umbrella over both of us. There, that's the way. Now off we go," said Mr. Tumnus. And so Lucy found herself walking through the wood, arm in arm with a strange creature, as if they had known one another all their lives. They had not gone far before they came to a place where the ground became rough, and there were rocks all about, and little hills up and little hills down. At the bottom of one small valley, Mr. Tumnus turned suddenly aside, as if he were going to walk straight into an unusually large rock. But at the last moment, Lucy found herself blinking in the light of a wood fire. They were inside of a cave. Then Mr. Tumnus stopped, and he took a flaming piece of wood out of the fire with a neat little pair of tongs, and he lit a lamp. "Now we shan't be long," he said, and immediately he put a kettle on. A kettle is what we use to hold water when we boil water to make tea or hot cocoa or even coffee, my favorite. Lucy thought she had never been in a nicer place. It was a little dry, clean cave of reddish stone with a carpet on the floor and two little chairs. "Oh, one for me and one for a friend," said Mr. Tumnus. And a table and a dresser and a mantelpiece were over the fire, and above that was a picture of an old faun with a gray beard. In one corner there was a door, which Lucy thought must lead to Mr. Tumnus's bedroom, and on one wall was a shelf full of books. Lucy looked at these while he was setting out the tea things. His books said things like The Life and Letters of Silenus, or Nymphs and Their Ways, or Men, Monks, and Gamekeepers, a Study in Popular Legends, or even Is Man a Myth? "Now, daughter of Eve," said the faun. It really was a wonderful tea that he brought her in for. There was a nice brown egg that was lightly boiled, one for each of them, and then sardines on toast, and then buttered toast, and then toast with honey, and then a sugar-topped cake. And when Lucy was tired of eating, the faun began to talk. He had wonderful tales to tell of life in the forest. He told all about the midnight dances, and how the nymphs who lived in the wells and the dryads who lived in the trees came out to dance with the fauns, and about long hunting parties after the milk-white stag, who would give you wishes if you caught him, and about feasting and treasure-seeking with the wild red dwarfs, and in deep mines and caverns far beneath the forest floor, and then about summer, when the woods were green, and old Silenus on his fat donkey would come to visit them, and sometimes Bacchus himself. And then the streams would run with wine instead of water, and the whole forest would give itself up to jollification for weeks on end. "Not that it isn't always winter now," Mr. Tumnus added gloomily. Then, to cheer himself up, he took out from its case on the dresser a strange little flute that looked like it was made of straw, and he began to play. And the tune he played made Lucy want to cry and laugh and dance and go to sleep, all at the same time. It must have been hours later when she shook herself and said, "Oh, Mr. Tumnus, I'm so sorry to stop you, and I do love that tune, but really, I must go home. I only meant to stay for a few minutes." "It's no good now, you know," said the faun, laying down his flute and shaking his head at her very sorrowfully. "No good?" said Lucy, jumping up and feeling rather frightened. "What do you mean? I've got to go home at once. The others will be wondering what has happened to me. But a moment later she asked, Mr. Tumnus, whatever's the matter? For the fawn's brown eyes had filled with tears, and then the tears began trickling down off the end of his nose, and at last he covered his face with his hands, and he began to howl. Oh. Mr. Tumnus! Mr. Tumnus! Said Lucy in great distress. Don't cry! What is the matter? Aren't you well? Oh, dear Mr. Tumnus, do tell me what's wrong. But the fawn continued sobbing as if his heart would break. And even when Lucy went over and put her arms around him and lent him her handkerchief, he did not stop crying. He just took the handkerchief and he kept on using it, and he had to wring it out with both hands whenever it got too wet to be of any use any more. So much crying that presently Lucy was standing in a very damp patch. Mr. Tumnus, Lucy bawled in his ear, shaking him. Do stop it at once. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, a great big fawn like you. What on earth are you crying about? Well, sobbed Mr. Tumnus, I'm crying because I'm such a bad fawn. Well, I don't think you're a bad fawn at all, said Lucy. I think you are a very good fawn. You are the nicest fawn I've ever met. Oh, you wouldn't say that if you knew, replied Mr. Tumnus between his sobs. No, I'm a bad fawn. I don't suppose there ever was a worse fawn since the beginning of the world. But what have you done? Asked Lucy. My old father now, that's his picture over the mantelpiece. He would never have done a thing like this. A thing like what? Said Lucy. Like what I've done. I've taken service under the White Witch. That's what I am. I'm in the pay of the White Witch. The White Witch? Who is she? Why, it is she that has got all of Narnia under her thumb. It is she that makes it always winter, and never, ever Christmas. Can you think of that? That's awful. But what does she pay you for? Oh, that's the worst of it. I'm a kidnapper for her, that's what I am. Look at me, daughter of Eve. Would you believe that I'm the sort of fawn to meet a poor, innocent child in the wood, one that I'd never done me any harm, and I pretend to be friendly with it and invite it home to my cave, all for the sake of lulling it asleep and then handing it over to the White Witch? No, said Lucy. I'm sure you wouldn't do anything of that sort, would you? But I have, said the fawn. Well, said Lucy rather slowly, for she wanted to be truthful and yet not be too hard on him. Well, that was pretty bad, but you're so sorry for it that I'm sure you will never do it again. Daughter of Eve, don't you understand? Said the fawn. It isn't something I have done. I'm doing it right now, right this very minute. What do you mean? Said Lucy, and she turned very white. You are the child, said Mr. Tumnus. I had orders from the White Witch that if ever I saw a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve in the woods, I was to catch them and hand them over to her. And, well, you're the first one I ever met. I pretended to be your friend, and I asked you to tea, and all the time I've been meaning to wait till you were asleep, and then I was going to go and tell her. Oh, but you won't, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. You won't, will you? Indeed, you really mustn't. And if I don't, he said, beginning to cry again, she's sure to find out, and she'll have my tail cut off, and my horns sawn off, and my beard plucked out, and she'll wave her wand over my beautiful cloven hoofs, and turn them into horrid, solid hoofs like a wretched horse's. And if she is extra and especially angry, she'll turn me into stone, and I shall be only a statue of a fawn in her horrible house until the 4 thrones at Paravel are filled. Goodness knows when that will happen, and whether it will ever happen at all. Oh, I'm very sorry, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy, but please, you have to let me go home. Oh, of course I will, said the fawn. Of course I've got to. I see that now. I hadn't known what humans were like before I met you. Of course, I can't give you up to the witch. Not now that I know you. But we must be off at once. I'll see you back to the lamp post. I suppose you can find your own way back there to Spare and the land of Wardrobe? Oh, I'm sure I can, said Lucy. Well, we must go as quietly as we can, said Mr. Tumnus. The whole woods are filled with her spies. Even some of the trees are on her side. They both got up and left the tea things on his table, and Mr. Tumnus once more put up his umbrella and gave Lucy his arm, and they went out into the snow. The journey back was not at all like the journey to the fawn's cave. They stole along as quickly as they could, without speaking a word, and Mr. Tumnus kept to the darkest places. Lucy was relieved when they reached the lamp post again. Do you know your way from here, daughter of Eve? Said Tumnus. Lucy looked very hard between the trees, and could just see in the distance a patch of light that looked like daylight. Yes, she said, I can see the wardrobe door. Then be off home as quick as you can, said the fawn. And can you ever forgive me for what I meant to do? Why, of course I can, said Lucy, shaking him heartily by the hand. And I do hope you won't get into dreadful trouble on my account. Farewell, daughter of Eve, said he. Perhaps I may keep your handkerchief? Oh, yes, rather, said Lucy, and then she ran towards the far-off patch of daylight as quickly as her legs would carry her. And presently, instead of rough branches brushing past her, she felt coats, and instead of crunching snow under her feet, she felt wooden boards, and all at once she found herself jumping out of the wardrobe into the same empty room from which the whole adventure had started. She shut the wardrobe door tightly behind her and looked around, panting for breath. It was still raining, and she could hear the voices of the others in the hallway. I'm here, she shouted. I'm here. I've come back. I'm all right. I hope you enjoyed Chapter 2. Tomorrow we'll be hearing a new chapter titled Edmund and the Wardrobe. What do you think will happen with Edmund? Have a great day.